Declassified. I'm Nathaniel Shepard, your host on behalf of author Daniel P. Douglas. In this series, we reveal real Cold War secrets and excavate the classified details your government hoped you'd never discover. And here we go. Project Sunshine, the Cold War program that collected human remains to study nuclear fallout. When the US government needed human tissue to study radiation, they turned to systematic collection of infant and child remains without parental consent. In 1955, at a secret meeting of the Atomic Energy Commission, Nobel Prize winning scientist Dr. Willard Libby made a startling request. If anybody knows how to do a good job of body snatching, they will really be serving their country. This wasn't a line from a dystopian sci-fi novel. It was real government business, part of a classified program with the cheerful name Project Sunshine. But there was nothing sunny about what followed. A systematic operation to collect human remains, particularly from deceased infants and young children, all without consent from grieving families. The goal, to measure the radioactive strontium-90 accumulating in human bones from nuclear weapons testing. This is the story of one of the most troubling chapters in Cold War science, a government-authorized program that would eventually collect tissue samples from over 1,500 deceased individuals across multiple continents through institutional channels that bypass the normal ethical safeguards of informed consent. The Orwellian naming, when sunshine meant something very different. Perhaps nothing captures the strange psychological distortions of Cold War thinking better than the program's name itself. Project Sunshine conjures images of light, warmth, and wholesome optimism, the complete opposite of a classified program to collect human remains. The name originated from a conference nicknamed the Sunshine Conference that examined long-term effects of atomic weapons. When the Atomic Energy Commission formalized the research, they kept this incongruously optimistic codename. This cheerful label for something so somber wasn't mere dark humor. It reflected a deeper cognitive dissonance that allowed scientists and officials to distance themselves from the human reality of their work. In classified documents, the remains of babies became samples, grieving parents became logistical barriers, and obtaining body parts without permission became collection. As George Orwell understood, controlling language helps control thought. The sunny name made it easier for brilliant minds to compartmentalize the ethical implications of their actions. Perhaps the most striking aspect of Project Sunshine was watching esteemed scientists discuss what they themselves termed body snatching, as though planning a routine lab experiment. Dr. Willard Libby wasn't some fringe figure or mad scientist. He was a respected chemist who would win the 1960 Nobel Prize for his development of radiocarbon dating. Yet declassified transcripts show him earnestly discussing the procurement of human remains without consent as patriotic service. The Atomic Energy Commission even hired what Libby called an expensive law firm to research the legality of taking human remains without permission. This bizarre blend of meticulous scientific planning with ethically dubious objectives created scenes that read like dark satire. Distinguished scientists debated the best methods for obtaining baby bones in formal government meetings. Government officials crafted elaborate cover stories about natural radiation studies to deceive medical professionals. Researchers complained in official documents that their supply of stillborns had been cut off, discussing human tragedy with the clinical detachment of a supply chain disruption. The transcripts reveal an almost surreal compartmentalization, where normal ethical boundaries dissolved when they interfered with national security objectives. The global collection network, from hospital to laboratory. The scale and sophistication of Project Sunshine's collection network adds another layer of complexity to this story. This wasn't opportunistic collection. It was systematic acquisition, operating through 26 bone collection sites around the world. To obtain human remains, project leaders created an elaborate web of institutional contacts and facilitators, such as hospital pathologists who could access stillborn infants and deceased children, medical professionals in foreign countries, missionaries and health workers abroad, and lastly, even family and personal connections of researchers. The operation spanned continents, with samples collected from the United States, United Kingdom, Australia, Europe, and beyond. What makes this particularly troubling is how it operated in plain sight inside respected institutions. Hospitals became unwitting partners in secret government research. In one particularly disturbing case documented during investigations in the 1990s, a British mother recounted being prevented from dressing her stillborn baby for the funeral. She later discovered this was to conceal that her baby's legs had been removed for Project Sunshine. While adults were also included in the study, the global scale of this operation, spanning national boundaries, oceans, and continents, speaks to the extraordinary priorities of Cold War science, where understanding nuclear fallout justified measures that would be considered unacceptable today. The bureaucracy of specimen collection, systems and procedures. Perhaps nothing captures the nature of Project Sunshine better than the mundane bureaucratic structures created to facilitate what was, in essence, an international operation to collect human remains without informed consent. The program developed standardized protocols for tissue collection and preservation, transportation of human remains across international borders, documentation and chain of custody, and cover stories for those without security clearance. Project managers wrote memoranda discussing quotas for bone samples with the same matter-of-fact tone one might use for office supplies. In one declassified document, a program administrator noted that they were now planning to go ahead with foreign bone collections, and that the most fruitful approach may be through personal contacts with foreign doctors. This administrative systematization of questionable practices, complete with cover stories, organizational charts, and standard operating procedures, reveals how institutions can normalize exceptional practices during times of perceived crisis. The scientific value and ethical costs. It's important to acknowledge that Project Sunshine did produce valuable scientific data that contributed to our understanding of radiation's effects on humans. The research ultimately played a role in the 1963 Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, which ended atmospheric nuclear testing and potentially saved countless lives from radiation exposure. However, this scientific value came at a significant ethical cost. The program operated under a utilitarian calculus, where the existential threat of nuclear war justified extraordinary measures. Scientific knowledge was paramount, regardless of how it was obtained. The ends, understanding fallout dangers, justified compromising informed consent. National security imperatives trumped individual rights, and the dead, especially infants, became means to protect the living. This moral calculation created a world where obtaining body parts from the recently deceased seemed not just acceptable but almost noble, a necessary sacrifice in humanity's struggle to understand and survive the atomic age. The project occurred during a time when radiation's dangers weren't fully understood. Strontium-90, which mimics calcium in the body and accumulates in bones, was a particular concern for growing children. This legitimate scientific worry, combined with Cold War anxiety, produced a program that in retrospect seems like a troubling example of scientific overreach. From sunshine to daylight, when the program became public. For decades, Project Sunshine remained classified, its operations hidden from public view. The project was officially acknowledged in 1956, but the true extent of its tissue collection methods remained obscured. It wasn't until the 1990s that the full truth emerged. In 1994, newly appointed Energy Secretary Hazel O'Leary implemented an openness policy that released over 1.6 million pages of classified documents revealing the government's secret radiation experiments. President Bill Clinton formed the Advisory Committee on Human Radiation Experiments to investigate. The committee's 1995 findings confirmed what seemed almost too troubling to be true. The United States government had indeed authorized the systematic collection of human tissue, particularly from infants, without consent or knowledge of the families. When this chapter in Cold War science finally came to light, it provoked international investigations. Australia, Britain, and other countries launched inquiries to determine how many of their citizens had been unknowingly part of this scientific enterprise. The story of Project Sunshine serves as a reminder of how national crises can normalize the exceptional and how easily ethical boundaries blur when fear of existential threats takes hold. Project Sunshine's complex and contradictory legacy of science, ethics, and national security. On one hand, the project's research produced valuable scientific knowledge. The data collected helped scientists understand how strontium-90 moved through the environment and accumulated in the human body. Perhaps the most valuable legacy of Project Sunshine is as a cautionary tale. It reveals how easily brilliant minds can rationalize questionable actions during times of perceived crisis, and how institutions can normalize the exceptional through bureaucratic procedures and euphemistic language. As we face new existential threats, from climate change to pandemics to artificial intelligence, the story of Project Sunshine reminds us to remain vigilant about maintaining ethical boundaries, even when fear pushes us toward extraordinary measures. The sunshine metaphor, so inappropriately applied to a program collecting human remains, ultimately proved fitting in one respect. Sunlight is indeed the best disinfectant, and bringing this program into the light of public scrutiny helped strengthen ethical standards for scientific research moving forward. The verdict: when truth is more sobering than fiction. The story of Project Sunshine reads like dystopian fiction. Respected scientists engaged in global collection of human remains, grieving parents unwittingly deprived of their children's complete remains, all under the bizarrely inappropriate banner of sunshine. Yet this sobering tale isn't fiction. It's documented history, confirmed by declassified government records and official investigations. Beyond the shock value, Project Sunshine offers a window into the moral universe of the early Cold War, where the shadow of nuclear annihilation distorted normal ethical thinking and reshaped institutional priorities. The program reminds us that history isn't always a simple morality tale of heroes and villains. It's often a complex story of how ordinary people, even brilliant scientists, navigate extraordinary circumstances, sometimes making decisions that later generations find not just ethically questionable, but profoundly troubling. Perhaps the most important lesson of Project Sunshine is how easily institutions can normalize the exceptional during times of crisis. The bureaucratization of ethically questionable practices, the clinical language that masks human realities, the moral calculus that justifies extreme measures, these don't require malicious intent, just frighten people operating in uncertain times. As we face new existential threats in our own era, this sobering chapter in Cold War science offers a valuable warning. Beware the sunny names and rational justifications that can lead good people down ethically problematic paths. And there it is, another documented descent into the declassified, filed properly, stamped accordingly, and revealed at last. I'm Nathaniel Shepherd, your host on behalf of author Daniel P. Douglas. Thank you for listening.